Brittany, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. I think we're ready to go. Welcome, everyone, to this week's live, if you haven't noticed, Caregiver Question of the Week. It's a really special edition of Live Caregiver Question of the Week because I have with me here Dr. Brittany Lamb. We're going to be talking about a really, really important subject, which is advanced directives, which is something that I frankly need to learn more about myself and that Dr. Lamb is a subject matter expert on. So I'm very happy to be here. Quick introduction. My name is Amelia. I'm an occupational therapist. I'm also the owner and founder of Higher Standards Caregiver Training, as well as the very proud co-founder of Whole Care Network University. That's WCN University. And where you can find some of Dr. Lamb's courses, just so you know. You can find her there, along with a bunch of other people who have really awesome materials for family caregivers. And one last thing before we get started, this is for educational purposes only. So it is not a substitute for health or medical advice or a therapeutic relationship. If you hear something today that makes you think that you or someone that you know or love needs assistance from a licensed healthcare provider, then please make sure you reach out for that assistance, as this is not a substitute for that. It is for education only. Okay. Hi. Welcome, Dr. Lamb.
Hello. Thanks for having me and for coming into my Facebook group. Hello to everyone inside the Facebook group and everyone watching now and in the future.
Yes, indeed, because of course this will be posted as recording later for folks who couldn't make it live. My very long introduction made everyone wait long enough, I think. I think that the best way to open up this conversation is actually, I want to reference a post that you did earlier today, which basically said, advanced directives are a tool. They're not everything. So can you explain what you mean by that a little bit more?
Yeah. So, okay. You all, for anyone who doesn't know me, I am an emergency medicine physician, and I online work specifically with dementia families and their caregivers and helping them navigate medical decision making. And advanced directives are over relied upon, and I support the use of advanced directives. I want to be clear about that. But they do not tell us what to do specifically in medical situations. So they are helpful tools to kind of guide us, but they are up for interpretation. And I think also, when we talk about, and we can kind of go into examples of that kind of as this conversation goes on, but I think we should probably define what they are, because one of them is more concrete and less up for interpretation than the other type. So there's two main types of advanced directives that people should know about.
I didn't even realize that was the case. I thought an advanced directive is an advanced directive, and I have an advanced directive. So what is the difference? What are the two types?
Yeah. So basically back in, I think it was 1990, there was a federal law that was passed that basically says, hey, look, people should be able to direct their health care when they're no longer able to speak for themselves. So that's when advanced directives were actually born, was not that long ago in 1990. So I'm older than advanced directives.
Me too, by a lot.
But there's two types. So there's the type that people classically think about with naming what types of medical treatment you would or would not want when you're not able to speak for yourself. Okay, so that's the advanced healthcare directive. Living will and 5 wishes fall underneath that category. The other main type of advanced directive is naming a person you want to speak for you when you're no longer able to speak for yourself. And I think what makes it complicated with actually defining these two different types, because that's it, that's pretty much it, is that in each state, there's different names for each class of these, each different type. So like medical power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, healthcare proxy, those are all the names of someone you would want to speak for you. And then on the other side, it's mostly like advanced healthcare directive, living will, 5 wishes.
Okay.
And a lot of times they do combo documents that, like the 5 wishes, allows you to name who you want to speak on your behalf. So they can sometimes be lumped together, but that is where they came from and what they're intended to do.
And this is probably such a basic question, but can you have both kinds of advanced directives for one person?
Yes. And I mean, you should have a document that states who you want to make your medical decisions. And like all of us should have some sort of advanced healthcare directive, ideally. My bone to pick with them is that they often don't get updated and they use very vague language. So people over rely on them and they don't actually then think about the medical things that they could be needing to make decisions about. So they're like, "Oh, I've got all my legal planning done. It's all done. I have all that covered." And no, go read the document. It doesn't tell you what to do if someone has a stroke and is no longer able to swallow. It doesn't tell you what to do if someone is septic or if their heart failure or COPD gets worse. So and then looking at dementia and people who are living with diseases causing dementia, those can affect their quality of life. So they're important tools, but yes, not a plan.
I think so one of the common misunderstandings that I hear about advanced directives too is on the flip side of that. So, basically what you just described is thinking that it is going to help make decisions in every case, which it doesn't really do. It's just a general guide. But on the flip side, I think some people are afraid of having an advanced directive because they think that it's going to bind the health care that they're able to receive. And they're afraid that they won't get health care that they would have wanted because of something that's in the advanced directive. Is that like a fear that you can speak to a little bit?
Yes, it goes both ways. It goes being too specific and then people not wanting to provide care because of what you wrote in the document, and over interpreting what you said. And then it also goes, if the document is not updated and it says that, someone, so let's say it says that someone, if they're end stage. I also have a problem with the language in the living will that's classically used. But say someone's, deemed to be very sick, end stage, have a terminal illness, and it tells us what they would want. If you don't, and it says that the person wants care to prolong their life. If they don't update that document after 10, 15 years have gone by and that preference has changed, now it leaves us in a situation where we're like, does this person still want this? That exact situation happened to me during flu season this past year. I had a very nice couple in the ER. The wife was living with dementia. The husband is her primary caregiver. They're living independently. He's managing everything. They're doing okay. She has decent quality of life. But I read her living will because we were considering admitting her to the hospital. And if I admit someone who's living with dementia to the hospital, I want to make sure that we know what we're going to do if they get worse and that that's documented. And so I asked him, I said, this living will says that she would want her life prolonged with care, even if she's very, very sick and maybe towards the end of her life. And he said, oh my gosh, no, I think she would want to be a do not resuscitate. She wouldn't want to go to the ICU and all these things. And if the wrong person is taking care of you or someone who's not comfortable, having these conversations and doing what's best for the person in the moment and recognizing the fact that this document is very old and likely outdated, it can get very complicated. Someone can have more care than what they would have wanted. So, yeah.
And I think that gets to something that you and I don't want to digress too much, but I think that gets to something that you and I have talked about before, which is that understanding that care should also be about quality of life, right? And really understanding what someone's goals and wishes are versus, and also understanding that sometimes prolonging someone's life can be uncomfortable. So really having an in-depth discussion with the healthcare provider in the situation and knowing what that person's wishes were and knowing what the goal of care is so important to achieve what ultimately that person would want to achieve in a given situation.
Yes. I think that I think also it's helpful for people to know that the spirit of these, the directives that tell us what someone would or would not want for treatment goes, that's why attorneys make these documents very vague. That's why the language is the way that it is. And it is really meant to tell us when to stop care. So the documents are they're there to tell us This is what the person would want if they're in a coma, which I can count on my two hands how many times I've diagnosed a patient in the emergency department with a coma. That's very rare. So, but my point is that, they tell us when to stop care. They don't tell us when to not start care that prolongs someone's life in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a quality of life thing. That's a quality of life versus length of life value that person has that typically changes over the course of someone's life and as they're living with underlying medical problems. And that's one of the big problems I have with advanced directives because they're not made to be adaptable over time. Most of them are not. So, and I like the 5 wishes, but I still think I think there's a lot of training and knowledge that you need in order to make these documents reflect what you would want, which is why I built my course and why I'm here online, because I advocate that people make medical decision plans for themselves that are not legal documents that can change over time and are based on people's goals of care. And I believe that this should be done for people who are aging in general, but especially for people who are living with dementia.
Mm-hmm. What is the difference? And you've kind of like touched on this a little bit, but it'd be good, I think, to know a little bit more. What is the difference between like a DNR, so a do not resuscitate order, and an advanced directive?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So a do not resuscitate form and another type of form that's just like the do not resuscitate form is a POLST form that we can talk about if you want. But those two forms, those are medical order forms. What they do is they take a person's goals and preferences for treatment. They have a conversation with the medical professional or the person who's making medical decisions on their behalf. Okay, so someone can do a POLST or a DNR for you as your medical decision maker, but they cannot change your advanced directives. They can't name your medical decision maker, and they can't create a living will or a 5 wishes for you, but they can do a DNR and a POLST. And these turn your treatment preferences into an order that medical professionals have to follow in all healthcare settings. They're transferable documents that go wherever you live. Paramedics have to follow them. So that's 911 people that come. People like me in the emergency department, nurses, people wherever this person lives have to follow these documents. A DNR, though, is very limited. It only tells us someone's preference towards CPR, which is only done when someone is actively dying, when they do not have a pulse and they're not breathing. So they're also limited, which is why I tell people they need to make medical decision plans. POLST is a little bit more of an expansion, and it actually does go along really well with talking about goals of care, because it not only talks about CPR, but it also talks about what someone would want if they're sick and they're not actively dying. And it breaks it up into the most aggressive care, this medium type of care, and then care that's focused on comfort. One caveat about POLST, and I could talk about it a long time, I'm on the executive committee for my state for POLST, and we're trying to get it more widespread use. Every state has a different version, and not all states use them. So could be MOLST, POST, POLST. So just something to know. But that's the main difference, is that it's actually actionable. DNRs and POLST forms are actionable, that I don't have to interpret that. That is an order for me to follow. Whereas an advanced directive, I have to interpret it. And that can be it can take time. And you have to get all the players, everybody who's involved with making the medical decisions, they all have to be on the same page, Mm-hmm. So interpreting living wills in emergency departments and even the 5 wishes, that can be really challenging to do, which is why I tell people they should make medical decision plans.
Right. So. Yeah. I mean, I think this all, on the one hand, it all totally makes sense as you describe it. On the other hand, I think it also really, again, highlights the fact that there are certain levels of complexity and in understanding this, and there are also certain levels of knowledge of healthcare, how it's provided, what it means to have some level of healthcare provided, where it's really important to get a better understanding of exactly what those things mean as they are putting together their medical decision plan, if they are putting together an advanced directive, if they are putting together a DNR, like really understanding like, what does CPR mean?
Mm-hmm.
What does intubation mean? What do these things really mean? And what do they involve in terms of the experience of the person who's undergoing them? And the only way to do that is to have conversations with your healthcare provider about it. But I also think that what you have provided through your course for medical decision making for folks with dementia is a great way for people to begin to access that understanding and make that plan. Because the fact is, it can be really hard to sit down and have an in-depth conversation with your primary care doctor who maybe only has 15 minutes to spend with you. I mean, like, everyone is overworked. No one has enough time. So the advantage of taking a course like yours, where you can actually take the time, you go through it, you have access to these materials for a long time, like, it's really important. So thank you. What I'm trying to say is thank you for the work that you're doing. Also, thank you for being on the Caregiver Question of the Week. Before we wrap up, is there anything else about this topic that you want to go over that we haven't covered today?
Let's see. We talked about who can do them, when they go into effect, when advanced directives go into effect. So living wills and 5 wishes, any of those documents, the medical power of attorney, only go into effect when someone loses their ability to make their own medical decisions. So you make your own decisions until you can't. Who can do them? So only you can do your advanced directives for yourself, unlike medical order forms, DNR, and POST. We talked about limitations. I think I talk about advanced directives a lot on social media. And it's something I write about in my blog. Like, I've written an article that kind of tears apart the do not resuscitate and the living will when it comes to people living with dementia. So I would point people to my website, blamd.com//blog to look at that stuff. But follow me on social media. Ask me your questions. That's what I'm here for. My Facebook community is for people to ask questions. If the language is unclear, because I could talk about that for a long time, what the different terms mean and why they're there and why that can be difficult to interpret, like vegetative state, coma, end-stage disease, terminal disease. The fact that a lot of these documents want 2 physicians to come together to say that you have that, they're very challenging to act upon in my job. So what I do for a living in the ER. So that's why I'm so passionate about it. So if anybody has further questions or wants me to extrapolate, I am happy to do so.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I noticed that people in my Facebook group are saying hi. So I wanted to call out Cheryl Ann. She's saying thank you to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Pamela, thank you. Pamela is a member of my course, and she says that it's wonderful and everyone should take it. So thank you, Pamela. You're the best.
I'm right there with you, Pamela. She's not lying, guys. Like, I've seen this course. It is, you should take it. That's my recommendation.
I'll teach you all about advanced directives and what else you need to do, because there's a lot. So,
like Dr. Lamb said, make sure that you are following her on her socials, because she posts a lot of information about this. Make sure you're visiting her website. Make sure you follow me too, because I do this every week. We answer Caregiver Question of the Week every week, and you can actually post your own question. You can either submit it in the comments. Please do make sure and tag me if you do that, so that I get a notification and I make sure and check that. But also, if you want to ask your caregiver question privately, then you can do that as well. And I will put a link down there for you to submit it privately as well, so that you don't have to, post all your business for the world. It doesn't have to be the whole world's business. I always answer these questions anonymously. So anyway, that's this week's Caregiver Question of the Week. If you have more questions about this specific topic, please post them in the comments. Tag me, tag Brittany. Make sure you're following us for more updates on future Caregiver Questions of the Week and other things that are going on in the world for family caregivers and the other resources that we share. Until then, though, guys, until next time, please stay healthy, stay well, and most of all, take care. Bye.
Thanks, Amelia.